Hello, my ATS playing buglers and buglettes. Welcome to another edition of ATS Fully Engaged Battlefield Walkarounds. Today we are going to walk around the battlefield of Ridge Runners of Toktong Pass. So we'll check out what we've got going on in the module, what we don't have going on in the module and you need to play it, interesting and exciting bits, and so forth. So today we're looking at a module from Korea, which is very exciting to me as a post-World War II fan. And this takes place during the Battle of the Chosin Reservoir at the beginning, well, not quite the beginning of the Korean War, sort of the middle of the beginning or the end of the beginning, something like that. In 1950, after the Chinese have just entered into the war, and the Americans in ROC realize they quickly need to exit stage south. So they're running quickly out of North Korea to the south. And this happens near the Chosin Reservoir. You will be able to see it's not on the map itself. This is just a pass, the Toktong Pass. This is important strategically in the area by the reservoir, not just for the Marines in question in this particular module who are escaping, but other columns of Marines who are also trying to escape. So the pass needed to be held for more than a hot minute. And likewise, the Chinese communists are trying to take the pass, so they have it and prevent the escape. If you're wondering what a Ridge Runner is, the Battlefield Walkaround in the module will not tell you, but I will tell you. I'll get to the map later, but you can see there's a nice long road over there, and this would be the ridge on one side and the ridge on the other. If you have a column of vehicles who must follow the road because the rest of the terrain is very difficult, it's very easy to snipe down with recoilless rifles or whatever. Sorry about that. Great camera work there. And so they clear the ridges of enemies. That's what a Ridge Runner is. So let's look at what comes in the module. That is important. We have 9 map panels, and it's a pretty large map. In spite of, it's 9's not huge, but it's more than your 22 by 34 normal wargaming map. It's almost 2 of those actually, I think. Maybe not quite, but pretty close. See, I won't be setting this up to play anytime soon, but it's hopefully at some point. It does have smaller scenarios. Again, we'll get to that in a little bit. It's a pretty map. I mentioned recently in another video, well, depending on when these get released, at some point, I mentioned that, I was like, winterized maps, comme ça. I'm not, that I like them, but I don't need them. But this one in particular is quite lovely, quite nice. And particularly compared to the original Toktong map, which is on the Vassal module. It's pretty. That one's pretty heinous. It's like lots of yellows and puces and greens, and obviously it's not winterized, so no white, no gray. But it doesn't. It's just ugly, and it doesn't represent very well the terrain from an aesthetic standpoint. We've got some counter sheets. We have 1 1/4 counter sheet. Now I have misspoken many a time because Critical Hit usually uses half counter sheets, and I say they're 1 on a lot of other Battlefield Walkarounds, but here we go. This is an actual full counter sheet. And I always show them so you know whether it's a actual full counter sheet or like the half that's kind of the standard 1 for Critical Hit. So we got 1 1/4. That's the 1. We'll look at that here in a second to show you the other 1 1/4. Dun, 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 dun. Oh, screw it. We're here. Let's do with it. Let's go with this. So these are the vehicles and the heavy weapons. You have got helos, which is exciting, and they do get used. No weapons, but they get used in one scenario to drop supply, and then the Americans have to take the supply, and the Chinese have to do something else. I think capture buildings and or prevent supply from being gathered up by the Americans. These are the supply counters, which look kind of strange, but there you go. Parachutes, and I guess in the winter, you've got very excitingly M26 Pershing. Very exciting because if you play a lot of World War II, it was the The Allies, you know, you're not getting a lot of 90B weapons, not getting a lot of 5.35s with the anti-artillery machine gun, anti-aircraft machine gun, excuse me. You got an F4U4, which does also get used. Now you've got 3 Chinese howitzers, which sadly don't get used in any of the scenarios, but if you want to do some DIY, it's there for you. Got a bunch of other random stuff. The only other things of which get used are no, I guess it all gets used, or most of it gets used. Yeah. Because there's only one AFV card, but most of those are AP. They're all APCs or trucks. And APCs and trucks don't have AFV cards. And we'll look where the AFV card is right now, because we're talking about it. There it is, the M26 Pershing. And that comes inside of the insert for the Ziploc. It's got some other handy charts. Attack range diagram for longs and shorts, which we'll talk about. Yeah, lots of other stuff for helicopters and plotted artillery, walking wounded, and frostbite. Let's finish up with the counters before we talk about all the other exciting stuff. Here we have Marines, of course. Got those awesome 969s. We do have some 5.68s, which represent, it says in the Battlefield Walkaround, represent Marines who are basically fresh out of boot camp, and they're no combat experience, and they're here. Now, is 5.68 an overrated, even for Marine, considering the fact that they have no experience and are just out of boot camp? Maybe they didn't even finish, advanced training or whatever. You can decide that, but that's what you get on this action. And then we have the Chinese Communists. 6.36 and 4.26 are their only 2 squad types. Now, are they underrated? Maybe. I think ATS and games in general have a hard time depicting, correctly or in an interesting way the differences between sides, between the kind of the styles of fighting between Western and whatever, we'll say non-Western forces. In this case, I do think it's probably more justified, as they talk about in the Battlefield Walkaround. The Chinese, not a lot of combat experience, a lot of guys didn't want to be there, so they're not going to be the best fighters. So it's reasonable to their stats are crap. Interesting, there are no commissars, just regular 117s and 118s for leaders. Yeah. Exciting other things, got, weapons. Here we have grenade squads, the 118s with a little 2x grenade symbol. Super zoom. Whoa, it's too close. Too close. What can I do? Okay, there we can go. Yeah, those guys get double grenade factors. So normally you multiply your SP by 3. They all multiply by 6, which is pretty potent. That's like an 18. If it's just one guy, that'd be on the 14 column. If you got 2 of them together, that's a 36. And they can each have a casualty too, because that doesn't affect their SP. The other interesting unit here is a bugler. A couple buglers there, this *** 8. And they can do 2 things. They can rally like a leader. I don't think they get a bonus, but the big advantage is it's in their hex and adjacent hexes, which is really cool. Very potent. And then they can also bugle to foment essentially a bonsai charge, which, as ever, there's some minor differences. There's a morale bonus, so it's not as good as a Japanese bonsai charge, because Japanese have just incredible morale. But yeah, that +2 is pretty big, considering how crappy the standard Chinese morale is. So that's it for counters. I do want to mention the Battlefield Walkaround. Well, I've mentioned it a couple times now. And glare, because I was too lazy to take them out of the zippy locky things, or the binder sheets. But this Battlefield Walkaround has a bunch of footnotes, which, okay, I mean, we're all history geeks, so I don't think anyone's gonna fault me for getting a kick out of footnotes. But you can make fun now if you want in the comments. But I get the impression sometimes, particularly with ATS products, particularly products that have come from ASL, that the Battlefield Walkarounds aren't as complete, maybe, as the ones in ASL. I mean, I don't get the feeling. I've seen it. I know I've seen the Battlefield Walkaround, or whatever they call it in ASL, for the DNB Fu module from Critical Hit, and I own ATS DNB Fu. So there's a big difference And there's specific things where you might say, nah, okay, why is this rule like this? And, you're justified in questioning that. It's really nice when in the Battlefield Walkaround says, this is why we modeled this way for these historical reasons. And I really appreciate that, especially in this module where there's some things where I'm like, okay, are the Chinese that bad? And they have some special rules about they just are eliminated when an enemy walks next to them and if they're broken, which is, like if you play ATS, that's a really heinous disadvantage. And this is a topic for probably another video article, but I don't really think that's a great from a game design standpoint because it kind of wrecks the ATS morale model. It can get pretty cheesy. You can just save one guy back and break the enemy with, as whatever you can, just a couple C1s. And then, at the last second, sprint one guy in there adjacent, and they're just like eliminated. Not even not in their hex, just next to them. And you might say, oh, Evan, that's gamey. I would never do that. Well, okay. I mean, it's one thing to look for gamey loopholes. It's another thing to purposefully not do the things that the game is telling you are good to do. At any rate, regardless of how you feel about that, and I think play will probably bear a little more out whether that works or not in the context of the scenarios, of course. Yeah, but regardless of how you feel about that, it's much more satisfying to have some historical background for why that's modeled that way. And this module includes some of that, which is very fantastic. And then we have 10 scenarios on 5 cards. I'll just show one because everyone knows what a scenario looks like. Lots of glare. Man, I probably should have taken those out of those binder sheets, but that's okay. 10 scenarios on 5 cards. We'll discuss the specifics of the scenarios briefly. And I think that's it for components. So what is missing? This is the important thing. So I mentioned frostbite, and I mentioned that there's like a little frostbite reminder here. Right around, here. For Toktong frostbite. So it says how to determine how many units roll on the frostbite table. But as we've seen with other modules, there is no generalized frostbite table in ATS. And there never has been, as far as I know. Yeah. So for example, Axis Legions, which I did a Battlefield Walkaround a while back for that module, and there was no frostbite table, but that's an old enough module that they have a Reta for it, because that was when Reta was still getting put out by Critical Hit. So we know exactly what the frostbite table looks like, but that's specific to that module. It says Germans and Soviets, or Germans and Russians, or whatever. You can't just extrapolate. You have to know. And this one, so this is really unfortunate, because in the original Battlefield Walkaround, the original errata, in the same errata document, they have an errata for Toktong Pass, and it says frostbite applies to every scenario. Okay, but then there's no frostbite table still. So then the second edition comes out, and there's still no frostbite table. Now they're very clear that the frostbite applies every single. Instead of putting I think that's in the Battlefield Walkaround in every single. Oh, right there. Yep, the BW frostbite rules apply scenarios though. Right, so you need the table to know what the results are. So it's a little frustrating that wasn't included, considering it's the second edition. I didn't mention that at the beginning, but yes, there's an original from 2006, and this is from 2016. I should also mention that the counters, these babies are from the original module. And so these are the same ones. I assume they come with all. Maybe they don't. It says these were bonus, but I don't know. You'd have to email Critical Hit before, or Noble Knight, or wherever you're buying from, to be sure. But I'm pretty sure they come with that. So these are the old school counters. They do have newer counters, which I believe are winterized, and they're more modern. Maybe they're prettier if you like the more modern counters. I've contemplated buying them, but that's like spending money on chromey things, which I don't usually do. Now this does lead to a potential issue. You have almost all the counters you need to play combat-wise. You are missing 11 4.26s from the CCF for one scenario. That's quite a few. and you're missing 4 of the 5.68s for the US from a different scenario. So you can play 8 scenarios, no problem. And then one scenario you're missing some CCF guys, which is going to be tough to replace. 4.26 I don't think is a common number. I don't think 5.68 is either. So, but there's less of them, so it might be less of an issue. The big issue is if you've got these guys and then you get the other guys. I think the counter sheets are the same. There's no preview, so I can't tell on the Critical Hit website. So if you don't want to mix and match, you'd have to buy 2 of the new counter sheets, which, and I think they're sold separately as Marines and CCF, Korean Marines and CCF. So yeah, that's like 4 counter sheets you'd be buying. That sounds like a lot. I would personally just buy the 2 new ones and then mix and match. But, if you're anal about that kind of thing, as a lot of wargamers are, then, something to be aware of. And let's glance a little bit more at the map. We've got, and let's send the camera flying. We might as well. Fox Hill, that's a famous place in this battle. It's a big terrain elevation difference going on here that goes up to plus 50 and down to minus 40 over here. Where the road is, the supply road. And all this is, the woods and the brush are actually pine scrub and pine forest, I think, which are slightly different. They have a cheaper entry cost unless there's rock also present, and scrub is plus 10 instead of plus 5. So it's much more likely to obscure when there's a height difference. There's some hard ground, so there's no emplacements, but sangers, which are here for some reason. I thought Sanger was a desert thing, but I guess not. But yeah, like I said, it's a pretty map. Now, real quick, the difference between the old map and the new map, because we should definitely talk about vassal support, VAT support. I would say there is VAT support. Other people may disagree. You've got the old map, and Scott Eagles, indefatigable as he is, has just released these counters for VATS, and the VATS 2 whatever extension he made, called VATS 2 counters. And so the old ones are there, not the new ones. And I think he still has to do the 5.5 or 5.68s, which he made it sound like he was going to do. So probably when this video is out, they will be there. So the counter are all there, the old ones. The map is the old map, which is, it's ugly. It might have been based on an ASL map because the hexes are pretty small for the emplacements, but it's definitely playable. The 2 differences are these buildings in the original map are stone buildings or masonry buildings. There's a couple more up there, which are hard to see, but they're buildings. And these ones are wooden. Not a big deal. You just fiat say if you want. The buildings in the old map are wooden as well. And there's minor line of sight distance differences because these are the little small buildings, so sometimes you can trace through them. But the other ones are just the one big solid building. Who cares? It's a huge map, and not all the action is going to take place around there, so it's not going to matter most of the time. The other big difference is there's a fairly significant amount of brush on the old map that's not here. Like, for example, this whole map panel has no brush. Brush, by the way, if you're wondering, is this yellow stuff over here, kind of golden. And man, I keep hitting the camera. Apologies. This map panel has no brush on it, and it, on the original map, it has maybe, 6 hexes or 8 hexes. I'd say there's probably a quarter less brush on this map than the other one. Why? Who knows? I don't know. I couldn't even guess. If it really concerns you in VATS, you could just put a little marker that this is no longer brush. But I wouldn't do that. That seems like a lot of unnecessary work. But yeah, so basically, in my view, there's definitely VAT support. It's just not going to be quite as pretty as some of the other modules. It's not going to have the newer map, not going to have the newer counters, but getting to play this module on Vassal is quite exciting, so I'll go for it. Briefly, let's talk about the interesting rules. I have in my notes that there are commissars, but I don't actually see any commissars. So is that true? Oh, there are commissars. Okay, that makes me feel better. See, commissars. 1 asterisk. There's lots of little stuff. +2 to the hit probability number for the CCF when they're firing HPT weapons, which is pretty nasty. There's camo for both sides at different moments. We talked about buglers bonsaiing. We talked about grenade squads. We talked about The broken enemies that are adjacent to enemies surrender, or disappear. Not surrender, they just disappear. We talked about... Oh, the USMC never surrenders, ever. Which the USMC is already really good in ATS, and now they're even better. And they have courage if they're under a hedgehog, a weapons pit, or a building, which... I don't like using courage to encourage people. Wait a second. I don't like using courage to encourage people. Yeah, that's how that sentence goes. Because I know it's like a design for effect kind of thing to keep them. Apparently the rule or the idea historically is that the Marines really didn't want to leave the buildings, which is understandable, but they probably wouldn't want to leave the buildings anyways. Like, give them some other, give them a morale bonus or some kind of defensive bonus or some kind of penalty if they leave, like more movement points to leave the building or the hedgehog or the weapons pit. But I mean, man, courage is like a huge deal in ATS. Like, so much of the game for the personnel side of the house is making the enemy break, not inflicting casualties. So I don't know. Again, that's one of those things where maybe you play it in the case of the scenarios and the way it all works together, it's fine. But just on the face of it, I'd be pretty... I'm not a fan of that sort of way of dealing with things. You got a couple more things, longs and shorts. The offboard artillery, or in real life it wasn't offboard artillery, it was just, wherever their 105mm cannons were set up, were at extreme range. So you can end up hitting more hexes, but with less firepower, basically, depending on how the accuracy diagram lines up, and that's right here. So that's kind of nifty. You can infiltrate out of melee, which is interesting. So you don't have to melee after the first round, I believe. Yeah. Apparently there wasn't a lot of melee going on. Neither side wanted to duke it out close range. You have surprise attacks, attempts to awaken. You got walking wounded, which is common in the post-World War II modules, which is basically just some guys are permanently winded. You have random rate of fire. So, man, I should look that up. I don't remember how that works, but I know it's a pain. I know you get a lot less rate of fire a lot less often. You have to roll. There's also jamming. Both of these things have to do with the cold and the weapons needing to, know when they're jammed up, or you need to fire, which is essentially representing your rate of fire, just to heat the weapon up so it would go. You got frostbite, of course, and recoilless rifle. So this is turning into an epically long video, which, 3 of you, if you make it here to the end, congratulations. The bonus round, talk about the modules, the scenarios, which is perhaps the most important part. It's, how would I characterize these? Almost all infantry. There's just one with vehicles, where you have a big convoy that's trying to exit with Pershings and a gazillion trucks. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you. There is one with helicopter. There's actually a couple with air support, which is cool. A couple with OBA. They're mostly medium to long-ish length. There's no crazy long scenario, but you've got, like 6, 7, 8 is the normal scenario length. Lots of control buildings, pick up supply. There's a little bit of exiting off the map. Control hexes. There's one, just like I said, one scenario with helos and supply counters. There's 2 night scenarios. There's only one surprise scenario. There's a good chunk of rules in the Battlefield Walkaround about the surprise rules, but then there's only one scenario that uses them, so there you go. You have one scenario. I said that. Oh, we're getting redundant here, but this is just so exciting. There's only one that uses the whole map, although one uses, it leaves off those 3 hex rows over there and 3 over there, so it's essentially the whole map. So you essentially have 2 scenarios that use the entire map, which is exciting, but of course requires that kind of space. And then several half maps, a couple tinies, and that's about it. So this is the Ridge Runners Toktong Pass. I'm excited to play it. I'm not going to recommend buying it. I haven't played it. This isn't a review. Battlefield Walkarounds are never reviews. But yeah, if you have any questions, put them in the comments. Come check us out on Discord, check out our blog, and come say hi. Happy ATSing.